Across all of history, we have carried the same three questions like small flames cupped in our hands. Where did we come from? Who are we? Where are we going? But there is another question that stands behind the others, like a figure in the doorway. It is bolder, more unsettling, and easy to ignore when life is loud. Are we truly the first civilization on this planet? Most people brush it aside as fantasy, the kind of idea that belongs in novels or late-night forums. After all, we are taught that human history moves in a straight line. Stone tools to modern industry, caves to skyscrapers. Everything neat, everything labeled everything, in a timeline framed by textbooks, as if no other option ever existed. Step back for a moment and look at the larger picture painted not by stories but by nature and by geology. That firm picture begins to thin. Earth has existed for more than 4.5 billion years. In that span, mountains have heaved upward and then fallen down to grains. Oceans have opened and later closed like slow-moving doors. Millions of species have risen, ruled their corners of the world, and slipped away. What we call human history, the part with writing and cities and monuments, covers only a few thousand years. On the scale of the planet, it is a blink most clocks would miss. If you pressed all of Earth's history into a single day, our so-called civilization would flare into being in only the last seconds before midnight. Seen this way, our existence looks like a small, bright match in a great dark room, beautiful for a moment and easy to forget if no care is taken. That is when the haunting question steps fully into the light. In billions of years, was there truly only one climb to civilization? Could there have been another long before us that rose and fell and left the stage so clean that we mistook silence for proof that we are first? If answers exist, they are not filed in old chronicles. They are buried in the ground itself. The Earth, however, is a strict keeper of memory. Rock bends and breaks. Rivers cut, carry, and erase. Continents drift like rafts. Every structure, no matter how grand, is finally ground down, buried, or recycled into something else. If a city of glass and steel stood here 10 million years ago today, it would not look like a ruin. It would look like sand and gravel and faint traces folded into stone. That is the paradox. The very stretch of time that allows a civilization to rise also allows its traces to dissolve into quiet. We live in an age that worships data and proof. But proof survives only when it gets lucky and escapes the slow storm of geology. No evidence is not the same as there was nothing to find. The most trustworthy memories are often kept in the quietest places. At the poles, old snow becomes ice that traps tiny bubbles of ancient air like sealed letters. At the bottoms of deep lakes, thin layers settle each year, pale in spring and summer, darker in autumn and winter, page after patient page. In caves, water drips and leaves films of stone that stack into delicate lines, each one a record of wet or dry smoky air or clear sky. Out at sea, blankets of silt and sand cover what falls and keep it from being disturbed. These are the libraries of the planet. When something unusual changes air or water or soil for long enough, these libraries tend to remember it. If another civilization lived here and later vanished, the book that Earth keeps would not preserve their streets and statues. It would keep their habits. Perhaps the breath in the ice would lean in a strange direction, as if something had burned huge amounts of old carbon for a long time. Perhaps a thin horizon rich in unusual metals would appear in lake mud and sea mud in far places at the same moment. Perhaps a new kind of beach stone would exist, made when hot waste fused with sand. In our own brief age, we have already drawn marks like these without trying. There is a fine dust from nuclear tests spread thin around the world. There are plastic fragments in soils, rivers, and oceans. There are hard lumps found along coasts where melted plastic and sand cooled into something that looks like a man-made rock. There is also a sudden rise in greenhouse gases that will settle into ice and mud as a readable signal. If we vanish tomorrow, those would be the lines that remain. Not heroic, not grand, but durable. Could a past civilization have left similar patterns and still slip from view? For such a vanishing to hold, two things have to work together. First, there must be a believable path to an ending. Second, there must be enough time for wind, water, and rock to blur the picture. An ending does not have to be a single loud day. It can be many small breaks arriving together. Weather that crops cannot handle, shortages of key materials, long wars that starve trade routes, a sickness that spreads faster than care can keep up, a sudden shift in ocean patterns, a solar storm that ruins electric systems and leaves people to fall back on older skills. History offers smaller rehearsals for all of these. After the last ice age, seas rose and swallowed a low country called Doggerland between Britain and mainland Europe. People left. The coastline changed. A place became a story. In the old Mediterranean, trade networks snapped and many cities shrank. People did not vanish, but the big shape of their world did. Multiply such changes by time, and you get not a dramatic fire, but a long dimming. Time does the rest of the work. Give Earth 10,000 years and most buildings are gone. Give it 100,000 and shorelines redraw our maps. Give it 1,000,000 and land that feels steady has been lifted, tilted, drowned, or scraped. What remains best are the quiet records. Air and ice, layers in lakes, lines in cavestone, blankets of silt on the seafloor. If a past civilization used energy in a way that does not match what nature does by itself, even for a short age, some of those records could hold it, not as a picture of a city, but as a steady mark that does not fit lightning fires, volcanic ash, or dust from falling rocks in space. Nature, of course, knows how to write bold lines without us. An asteroid ended the age of the dinosaurs and left a dust rich in a rare metal spread around the world. Great volcanic events have darkened the sky and poured gases and metals into air and sea at scales no factory could match. Forests burn from lightning and drought. The planet has many loud voices. That is why a fair method does not trust a single clue. It asks for a pattern that repeats across places that never speak to each other unless something unusual makes them sing at the same time. Do ice cores, lake beds, cave stones, and seafloor sediments line up and tell the same small story in the same slice of time? If yes, lean closer. If not, respect the silence of the record. Humility here is not a mood, it is good listening. So where did they go if there were others? Some ends are fast and leave sharp lines like a sudden season of dust. Others are long fades. Cities become towns. Towns become farms. Farms become scattered homesteads. Forest grows through the old roads. People move inland as seas rise. Children learn new names for old places. After enough centuries, the map in human memory no longer matches the ground underfoot. A wide culture can turn into dots on an empty map if you wait long enough and forget which dots were connected. None of this requires mystery. It only requires time and the regular habits of the earth. What does this say about us? It says we are not only builders, we are readers. We can learn to read the diary of the planet. We can accept that the absence of statues is not proof that nothing happened. We can carry a calm kind of humility. That does not make us small, it makes us honest. It asks us to test ideas with simple fair checks in real places. Does the ice tell the same story as the lakes? Does the cave stone agree with the seafloor? Do far coasts show the same thin line rich in certain metals at the same moment in time? If the answer is no, we say no. If the answer is maybe we look again with better tools. The goal is not to win an argument. The goal is to learn what kind of world we live in and what kind of creatures we are. There is also a clear mirror here. If we are the first, then we have no guide but our own care. There is no footprint like ours laid down before. If we are not the first, then the planet is less impressed with us than we are, and the lesson does not change. In both cases, the wise path is the same. Read the diary. Look for patterns that repeat across many places. Ask questions that are simple and fair. Be strong enough to accept a quiet answer. Carry one clear question forward from here. If a lost civilization once lived on this planet, what single habit would give it away beyond doubt? Not a statue, not a legend. A habit that shows up in the quiet pages of ice and lake and cave and sea, the same small note repeated across far apart places, so plain and steady that once you notice it, you cannot unsee it. Maybe it is a strange breath trapped in ice. Maybe it is a thin line rich in uncommon metals spread across distant shores. Maybe it is a new kind of beach stone that nature never made before. Or maybe it is a silence so clean that it forces us to admit we are alone on this page of time. Whatever the answer, the search will tell us not only about any possible them, but about us, about where we came from, and about how we choose to live now, if we want to be worth remembering. Memory is fragile and writing lasts only as long as someone protects it. We forget that every civilization stands on a foundation. You cannot touch a shared memory that must be fed, copied, and carried. Stop feeding it, and it fades faster than we think. Look at how quickly bright worlds slip into shadow. The Maya raised step pyramids tracked the sky, carved dense signs into stone, and within a few centuries of collapse, their cities were swallowed by green, and their books burned or lost. The Hittites once challenged Egypt and ruled Anatolia. Then they vanished so completely from human memory that for 2,000 years the world forgot they had ever existed, until spades in the ground and tablets and strange scripts brought them back. Even Roman concrete and art ahead of its time disappeared for centuries before someone relearned its secret. The lesson is blunt. Without a thread of writing passed from hand to hand, a civilization can be almost forgotten in a few generations. Children grow up without the old stories. Manuscripts rot in rooms no one visits. Temples fall, jungle digests carved faces. Knowledge that once felt common becomes rumor, then myth, then nothing. We have watched that kind of forgetting happen within a few thousand years. Now stretch the lens. What remains after millions? A language, the finest tool a mind can shape, dies the moment no mouth speaks it. A library, the soul of a culture condensed, can disappear in a single night of fire. A civilization, no matter how grand, is erased if there is no unbroken chain to pull it forward. The painful question follows: have there been memories like that, full and alive, cut clean and lost long before our story began? If so, all that would remain are ripples in old tales. And those ripples are everywhere, a golden age gone aflood that reset the world, giants and bright beings who once walked among us. You find these motifs in Greece and India, across the Americas, on the scattered islands of the Pacific, as if they were splinters of a broken memory that never fully died. Perhaps they are only driftwood from storms of the mind. Perhaps not. Either way, they remind us that human history is not a fortress carved in stone. It is a picture drawn on sand, waiting for the first wind. One wave can be enough. War, plague, fire, a series of bad seasons. Entire archives tapered to silence. When the dust settles, the next people step on to an empty shore and believe there was never anything here but tide and sky. History is not a treasure chest that locks things safely away. It is a song. If we stop singing, it vanishes. So if a civilization stood here before us, the first question is simple and hard: why is there nothing left to see? To answer it, we have to stop thinking of Earth as a fixed stage and remember what it is: a giant machine that recycles and rewrites its own surface without asking permission. The planet is alive in more than the way it holds life. It is alive in the way it moves. Mountains rise and thin into dust. Oceans open and close like slow doors. Continents raft on plates that crash to build the Himalaya, then drift apart to open the Atlantic. Land is only a moment in a dance that never stops. Imagine a modern city: steel, glass, concrete, electricity. Leave it alone. In a few decades, plants split pavement and trees push through floors. Storms tear roofs. In a few centuries, towers sag and fall. In a few thousand years, ruins collapse into low hills. In a few 100,000, those hills blend into layers. In a few million, the slow churn of plate and heat buries and bends those layers into new rock. On the timescale of geology, a million years is a blink, which means even a 10,000-year industrial age, twice the length of all our written record, can be wiped to silence in 1 or 2 million years. Metals rust back to Earth. Plastics break and weather or sink and fuse into odd stones no one recognizes. Skyscrapers become gravel. The proudest skyline returns to ingredients. This is why the geologic record rarely shows anything that looks like a city. The slices we can easily study reach back only tens of millions of years, and even those have been folded, heated, and chewed by time. Deeper than that lies beyond our tools, or has been altered until the original pattern is gone. Paleontology brings us the delicate bones of dinosaurs, the ghosts of leaves-layered rocks that hold the memory of ancient climates. But those survived because luck helped them. They were buried fast in the right kind of mud underwater, poor in oxygen, and left undisturbed. A global civilization cannot expect such luck on every street. Think of Earth as a brilliant, ruthless artist. To paint a new picture on the same canvas, it scrapes the old one away. Seen this way, the vanishing of past civilizations, if there were any, is not mysterious. It is normal. So when we do not find evidence, it does not mean none ever existed. It means the planet did its work too well and filed the past under mountains, under seas, under continents that no longer sit where they used to. Here is the chill at the center of the thought: if we disappeared, our age of power and code and light would meet the same end. In 10 million years, we would be a handful of oddities in stone, a carbon breath out of place, a thin layer touched by plastics, a sprinkling of strange atoms from our brief flirts with the nucleus. That's all. One day, if another clever species rises and asks our question, they may say there are no ruins, so there were no people like us. They might be wrong the way we may be wrong now. Try a simple thought experiment. Suppose humanity vanishes tomorrow. No repairs, no caretakers, no one to pay the electric bill. How fast does everything we call civilization fall apart? And what if anything can testify that we were here after 100 million years? Within days, most power plants shut down. Cities go dark. Within months, animals push back into streets. Vines climb. Birds nest in traffic lights. Within a few years, roofs fail and highways crack. Storms and roots finish what gravity begins. Within a few decades, the steel bones of skyscrapers redden and weaken. Glass falls. Flood lines creep higher as storms chew at the edges of towns. Within a few centuries, wood is dust iron, and aluminum have leached and flaked, and only the most stubborn materials, glass, ceramics, a few composites, remain in broken piles that weather every season. Within a few thousand years, most cities lie under soil and plants. Great works, dams, bridges, statues, if they stand at all, are scattered teeth along rivers and coasts, easy to mistake for odd rocks. Seas rise, ice retreats, storms grind. The mark of our urban life becomes a smudge more than a signature. Within a few 100,000 years, nearly all metal has cycled back into simpler forms. Concrete, once sold as forever, has turned to sand and gravel and joined the nearest stream of sediment. The wonders of our species, from New York to Shanghai, from pyramids to the Great Wall, are pressed flat into layers you would not pick out without knowing where to look. Give the planet a few million years and the face of the world is new. Young mountains lift, old ones slump, rivers cut new paths, deserts crawl. Plates move continents thousands of miles, bury what remains under miles of rock, or raise it into ranges where ice and wind erase the last clues. If some future mind goes looking, it will have to dig deep, and even then, it may not understand what little it finds. A seam might look like a natural oddity. A fused beach stone might pass as a quirk of heat and tide. After 100 million years, the world could be unrecognizable. Oceans may have opened or closed. Continents may have rearranged. The heart of today's civilization might lie beneath black water. Our machines and monuments will not stand in the open air. They will be footnotes under stone, a breath of carbon that leaned the wrong way, a page dusted with plastic ghosts, a few quiet traces of uncommon atoms. No Eiffel Tower, no Statue of Liberty, no internet, no books, just thin scars hidden in the deep pages. Set beside this, the myths of floods and golden ages sound different. They are not proof of anything by themselves, but they are a reminder. Memory breaks easily. Stories are bridges over gaps we no longer see. Some lead nowhere. Some lead back to rivers that really did rise, to coasts that really did drown, to cities that really did fade much faster than pride allows. When you understand that, you stop treating history like a wall that protects us from the past. You treat it like a fire that needs tending. So what do we keep and how? We keep habits, not statues. We keep songs, not slogans. We keep the ability to read the planet's quiet pages so that when our own pages fade, the next readers can still understand the tune. That is why this search matters, even if it ends with silence. It teaches us how forgetting works. It teaches us how to build memory that can survive wind and water. It teaches us to hold humility without losing courage. Carry this forward. If anything like a stood here before the earth would not save their faces, it would save their habits stamped into ice and mud and stone. And if nothing like a stood here before the earth is still teaching us the same rule, nothing we build is forever, and the only way to be remembered is to live in a way that leaves a mark we are not ashamed of when the pages are turned. In the next part, we'll open those quiet books on purpose ice lakes, caves, seafloors, and ask them a simple, stubborn question. Do they ever sing the same small note at the same time? A note that nature does not usually sing alone. If they do, we will lean closer. If they don't, we will listen harder to the silence and learn from that too. Our thought experiment carries a hard truth. Even a global civilization like ours would not survive the abyss of deep time. We would be erased from the surface the way millions of species were erased before us. And if another mind rose long after it would face the same question we ask now, was anyone here before us? That question never dies because the earth does not write history in words. It writes in stone and fossils in traces so faint the eye can miss them. Everything else is an illusion of permanence we tell ourselves to sleep at night. We like to imagine digging into the past as if opening a giant book, each layer, a neat page, each page a chapter. The reality is messier. The book is full of holes. Chapters are missing. Whole sections have been overwritten. The planet's archive is not a perfect vault. It is a cracked cabinet with broken shelves, a patchwork with gaps so wide you can fall through. Much of Earth's past is gone for good, and what remains is noisy, partial, stubborn. Consider the fossil record. Across billions of years, only a tiny fraction of all life became fossils. Most creatures, when they die, rot, get eaten, or dissolve without leaving a trace. To fossilize, you need luck, quick burial, low oxygen, and stability for ages. Out of the vast parade of life, we see only a thin slice. If life itself is that fragile in stone, how much slimmer are the odds for things people build materials that prefer to return to dust? Geology keeps painting over its own canvases. Old layers are bent, broken, subducted, melted into lava, or buried under the sea. The deeper we look, the quieter it gets. Entire stretches tens of millions of years long, read like blank pages, as if someone tore out chapters and threw them to the wind. That silence is not proof that nothing happened. It is proof that the editor is relentless. This leads to a troubling paradox. We speak as if we understand deep time, but our story is stitched from scraps, a bone here, a pollen grain, there a handful of cores, a dozen lucky sites. We are trying to rewrite a 1,000-page novel from a few surviving lines. Anything that did not fossilize anything, not blessed by rare conditions, has already slipped out of memory. Think about layers older than 100 million years. In many places, they are folded and shattered or buried so deep our drills never greet them. If an industrial age lived in that window, our chances of finding its mark are small. Cities, roads, machines, crushed, cooked, recycled into anonymous rock. The quiet of the record proves nothing except this: the earth is very good at hiding its past. Silence across deep time is a warning. It says that every civilization, including ours, can fade to nearly nothing. When we stare into that archaeological black gap, we are not only asking whether anyone came before, we are forced to face our own end. If we vanish, will the next pages carry any trace of us? Or will we join the darkness between chapters? Now and then, hunters of the past stumble on things that seem out of place, artifacts found where they should not be. They go by a popular name, parts, out-of-place artifacts. They are the odd notes in archaeology's long song. Some have been explained as misreadings, pranks, or natural lookalikes. Others linger in gray zones. Take the small metal spheres from South Africa, some with parallel grooves found in rocks said to be ancient. Most geologists argue they are natural mineral nodules, shaped by sediment and pressure. To many eyes, they still look suspiciously made. Or consider the little pottery jar with a copper core, often called the Baghdad battery. Whether or not it was truly used to store a charge, it hints that simple electrochemistry might have been toyed with long before modern textbooks say it was discovered. Or the Piri Reis map drawn in the 1500s that some claim sketches parts of a far southern coast with picky accuracy. Historians counter with more modest readings and source maps. Taken one by one, each oddity is a curiosity. Placed side by side, they tempt us with a larger thought that human history does not march in a straight line. It loops and spirals, finding, losing, rediscovering. Science is right to be cautious. Most parts yield to sober explanations, unusual geology, dating errors, eager imaginations. But even when the mystery dissolves, their value remains. They remind us that our knowledge has edges. The past is not a finished painting. It is a quilt with holes, and sometimes we cover those holes with guesses that fit our time better than theirs. The strange objects are mirrors, they reflect our limits more than they reveal lost worlds. And yet curiosity is not a crime. Sometimes a spark is enough to light a better question. Set oddities aside and face the practical problem, our mental picture of an industrial civilization, steel machines, concrete towers, copper webs, sets us up to miss the truth. Those very materials are the least faithful partners over long time. Iron is the metal of rails blades and skeletal beams. It is also eager to return to rust. In damp air, decades can turn massive iron into red dust. Leave a rail line in the woods and it melts into soil within a lifetime. A few thousand years and iron structures are gone, their oxides mixed into mud. Copper lasts longer but not forever. It pits greens flakes and blends back into ore. Only in dry, sealed, low-oxygen pockets do copper things sleep long, and that is rare. Gold and silver endure, but the odd nugget proves nothing. We find native gold in nature without invoking lost empires. A handful of coins in a future core would be trivia, not a thesis. Even concrete, one of our proudest inventions, is not immortal. Freeze and heat split it. Roots pry it apart. Salt weakens it. Tens of thousands of years grind it to gravel. A modern city of concrete eventually becomes a drift of stones. From above it will look like an odd hill. From below it will read as a layer of slightly unusual sand. The record we trust most, written words, dies even faster. A language ends when the last mouth goes quiet. A library ends when a single night of fire finds it. Copying is survival, and when copying stops, memory does too. We have seen this within our short span. How much easier is it for deep time to finish the erasure? This is why the Earth's quiet rooms matter more than ruins. If anything like us lived before, its strongest chance at leaving a mark is not the city it built, but the habit it pressed into air, water, and ground. A breath that leans the wrong way. A thin line rich in metals and far-off lakes at the same moment. A beach stone born from sand and heat no storm can make alone. A sprinkle of odd atoms from a brief dance with the nucleus. Those are the kinds of notes that survive the long editing of the planet. We are writing notes like that now without trying. They will be our test case for readers to come. Does this mean we should accept every story about lost worlds? No. It means we should build rules and keep them. Prefer many small clues over one big claim. Demand that separate archives agree on timing. Subtract what volcanoes, asteroids, and wildfires can already explain. Work twice as hard to prove yourself wrong as to be right. These rules do not kill wonder. They protect it from noise. There is too a human side we cannot ignore. We want to be permanent. We build with that hunger in our hands. Pyramids, walls, towers that kiss the sky. We tell ourselves that scale equals forever. Deep time answers gently but firmly. Nothing you can touch lasts. Only patterns do. If we are remembered, it will be because of the ways we change the chemistry of quiet places, not because of the shadows our buildings threw at sunset. So what exactly should we expect to find if a civilization older than memory once stood here? Not a machine in a rock, not a street under a dune. Expect instead a chord, several soft notes that line up across ice lakes, caves, and seas. Expect a signal too broad to be local weather and too steady to be a single bad year. Expect something that nature can imitate in part, but not in full, and certainly not on several continents at once without a shared cause. If we do not find that chord, we do not panic. Silence is also an answer. It may say we are early. It may say our test needs tuning. Either way, we learn. Before we close, return to the thought experiment and push it forward. 100 million years from now, the Earth is a stranger again. New mountains, new coasts, maybe new ice. The place we now call the center of the world might sleep under a deep, cold sea. What remains of us will not be bones in halls or arches on hills. It will be thin scars under stone, a breath, a seam, a whisper. Another mind may find them, or not. That too tells us who we are: temporary, curious, and capable of care. In the next part, we will do something simple and brave. We will define the chord clearly, what notes to listen for, where to listen, and how many ears must agree before noise becomes signal. We will choose candidate places on a map: drowned shelves, old deltas, quiet basins, and polar archives, and set out a plan to read them in the fairest way we can. If a lost civilization has a chance to be heard, This is how we will hear it. If not, we will have learned how to listen better to the planet we share. Give the Earth enough time and everything we make is swallowed by sediment. It becomes part of the ground pressed into layers that look no different from natural stone. That leads to an unsettling truth. If an industrial civilization lived here millions of years ago, the obvious metal traces are probably gone. Rust wins. Heat and pressure win. What might remain are only faint chemical oddities, a sudden pulse of strange atoms, a sharp bend in the planet's breath, a dusting of tiny metal grains scattered like quiet glitter through rock. Even then, would we dare call such marks the fingerprint of a lost world? Or would we choose the comfort of old explanations and file them under volcano impact wildfire, anything that lets the familiar picture stay tidy? Look at what even known civilizations leave behind. Sumer, Egypt, Rome. The record we have is not the rule. It is the exception. It is what luck spared. We are staring at a thin slice and pretending it is the whole cake. If we ourselves vanish, our towers of steel, our concrete roads, our webs of copper, will follow the same script. Give it a few million years and they will be gone, erased as if they never were. When the material fades to dust, what remains is sometimes memory. Not the kind in textbooks, but the kind in stories. Across the world, from Greece to India, from the Pacific to the Americas, we meet tales about great peoples who rose and were swept away. Atlantis is the famous one. In a pair of dialogues, Plato tells of a mighty island that sank in a single day and night. For many, it is a fable about pride, a moral lesson dressed as history. Yet the story endures a whisper that perhaps there was once a world before our world. It asks a hard question: can an entire civilization vanish and leave only a legend? Further east, we find Lemuria, first imagined in the 19th century, to explain how animals were spread across oceans, then adopted by mystics as a radiant land swallowed by the sea. In the Pacific, Mu plays a similar role in island lore, a great realm fallen into water. What matters is not whether these names point to map coordinates. It is that separated cultures tell versions of the same thing: a golden time destroyed by flood or disaster, with the present as the quiet aftermath. Is that just coincidence, the simple fact that water both gives and takes life? Or are these dull echoes of real catastrophes carried forward in memory until memory hardened into myth? From the chair of conventional science, Atlantis and Lemuria are stories, not places. But under the light of deep time, their meaning shifts. They remind us of a feeling that never leaves us, that we might not be first, and that everything we build can be taken by the sea. Perhaps these myths do not depict industry in the modern sense. Perhaps they keep a more basic fear that order can vanish overnight, that what people know by heart can be drowned and retold until the edges blur. Over millennia, sharp memories become soft legends, fragments of something too large to hold. The flood story is the clearest shared thread. In scripture and saga, in epics and fireside tales, water rises, cities fall a handful live to begin again. It is not only Noah's Ark. In the far older epic of Gilgamesh, a man named Utnapishtim is warned of a world-swallowing flood. He builds a great boat, rides out the waters, and releases birds to test the retreat, details that rhyme almost exactly with later versions. In India, a god in the shape of a fish warns Manu to prepare. In Greek myth, Deucalion and Pyrrha survive while the rest perish. Across the Americas and the Pacific, peoples tell of waters that climbed higher than any memory before or after. Why does the same pattern appear in places that never met? Partly because water is universal, but partly because the planet really did change the sea. At the end of the last ice age, roughly 12,000 years ago, ice sheets melted fast. The ocean rose meters upon meters over centuries, steps and pulses, not a smooth slide. Low coasts where people tend to live were drowned. A wide, low plain called Doggerland that once connected Britain to the European mainland vanished beneath the North Sea. Trawlers sometimes still bring up its bones. Similar shelves were lost worldwide. If you had lived through that, you would have told your children. They would have told theirs. After enough retellings, the names would be gone, but the shape of the story would remain. The waters came, and we moved. There is a bolder possibility, too. Perhaps some flood myths hold a faint memory of coastal societies Towns, harbors, workshops washed away by rising seas. Not factories that belched smoke, but places where people made and traded more than their inland neighbors. When water wins, it wins clean. Shorelines creep back, waves move sand, storms tear and bury. What is left lies under silt beyond the reach of casual digging. 1,000 years and all that remains is a rumor in a fisherman's net. 10,000 and the rumor is a story. 100,000 and the story is a legend no one can pin to a shore. None of this proves Atlantis. It does something better. It tells us to stop treating myth as either map or trash. A myth is a clue. It points a finger. Our job is to test where the finger points with fair tools. If the seafloor core says yes, that matters. If the cave rings say no, that matters too. Either way, we learn. Return to the harsher side of the ledger. The Earth is not a safe house. It is a reset machine. Global disasters are baked into its rhythm. An asteroid ended the reign of the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. In a geologic instant, most species were gone. If an industrial civilization had lived, then it would have been sand and ash within hours. A supervolcano is quieter until it isn't. About 74,000 years ago, a huge eruption at Toba in Sumatra threw enough ash into the air to darken skies and chill the world. Our own species may have been reduced to a few thousand survivors. Agriculture cannot grow without sun. Cities cannot eat without agriculture. Even the most advanced society is brittle when the sky stays gray too long. Ice ages are slower knives. For 2 million years, the planet has swung between cold periods when ice crawled far from the poles and warmer pauses like ours. Sea level fell and rose by tens of meters. Any coast-heavy culture would be erased and erased again. Today's sea line is just a breath in that larger rhythm. Add in other shifts the angle of Earth's path, the sun's mood, the great conveyor belts of ocean water forces that turn grassland to desert and back that moves storms to new routes. A civilization that cannot bend with such changes breaks. These resets reveal a truth we do not like. We exist in the pause between blows. We are here because the dice landed kindly for a while. That is not cause for fear. It is cause for clarity. It tells us where to look for the only marks that might bridge the resets, the quiet chemical signatures. What would those be? Start with the breath of the air. If a civilization burns a lot of old fuel, coal, oil, gas, the global mix of carbon tilts in a way that does not match lightning fires or simple drought. The tilt is small, but it shows in ice and in lake mud if it lasts long enough. Then look for metals, not statues, but a thin rise of certain elements in sediments widely separated and close in time. Mining, smelting, and scattering leave dust that travels farther than we think. Then look for new stones. We have already fused plastic with sand into hard lumps on beaches. Future readers will find them. There are other fusions too, glasses that form only at heat hotter than wildfires. One piece is an oddity. The same piece appearing in far places of the same age starts to look like a habit. There is also the quiet sparkle of rare atoms from our brief play, with the nucleus a dusting that settled during the years of open-air tests. Nothing in nature produces exactly that pattern on exactly those dates. If we vanished tomorrow, those atoms would still speak for us in a million years, softly but clearly, to anyone who knows the alphabet. And yet, even with such signals, honesty requires restraint. A single spike of carbon can come from a volcano. An odd glass can come from a meteor. A metal seam can come from dust blown off a desert mine. This is why we keep returning to the same rule: do not trust a soloist. Trust the choir. Ask for 3 or 4 different voices in different rooms singing the same note at the same time. If the ice leans, the lakes agree, the sea floor nods, and a new stone shows up on beaches on 2 distant continents, then we can speak more boldly. Not with certainty carved in stone is poor at keeping promises, but with confidence earned by patient reading. So why do humans so often choose the safer story? Why reach for volcano when the pattern hints at something else? Because simple explanations are easier to live with. They let the past stay in its box. They let us believe our timeline is neat. But maturity is learning to hold 2 thoughts. Most oddities are natural, and still the world is allowed to surprise us. Skepticism is not the enemy of wonder. It is its keeper. Put it all together and a rough map appears. Material ruins will fail us most of the time. Myths will tease but cannot testify alone. The only durable bridge across deep time is chemistry written in quiet places and repeated across distance. That is what we should hunt. Not proof on a platter, there is no such platter, but a handful of soft, stubborn facts that fit only if something unusual once lived and worked here. If we find them and they agree, we will have our ghost signature. If we do not, we will have learned how to listen well enough to stop fooling ourselves. Carry one image into the next chapter, a thin horizon inside a core pulled from the seafloor, a shade darker than the layers above and below, speckled with metals that do not belong, and tiny stones born of heat. Miles away in a lake bed, a matching stripe. In a cave, a period where the drip lines lean in the same direction. In ice, a breath that shifts by the same small amount. 4 quiet rooms, 1 shared note. That is what a lost civilization would look like after the world has done its work. In part 5, we'll turn this from poetry into a plan, the checklist of signals, the short list of places, and the threshold at which a whisper becomes a case. We will ask how many continents must agree how wide in years a moment can be, and how to tell a human habit from a planet's mood with the least possible guesswork. When the next great wave arrives, a falling stone from space, a mountain that opens its throat, or a long white winter of ice, everything we built could vanish like chalk in the rain. On the clock of deep time, these resets are just the planet's heartbeat. Each beat wipes a chapter and leaves a blank page. Perhaps there were chapters so far back we will never read them. Perhaps whole civilizations were erased by the pulse of the earth itself. If cities, metals, monuments, and even shared memory fade, the honest question becomes simple and sharp: is anything from a civilization tough enough to cross that eraser? Is there a signature that can lie low in stone for ages and still be read softly, but clearly someone like us lived here? If such a mark exists, it will not be a tower or a tool. It will be a pattern written into the quiet rooms of the planet, into air that was trapped mud, that settled stone, that grew drip by drip. Think about how we recognize the rock that ended the dinosaurs. We did not find the meteor itself. We found a thin, unusual seam laid down across many continents at the same moment. Deep time is read that way, not by faces, but by choruses. We are sketching our own chorus now, whether we want to or not. The loudest note is the planet's breath. We have pushed the mix of gases upward and outward. Oceans sip that breath and carry part of it into future stone. One day a patient drill could find a layer where the numbers bend in a way they do not bend by themselves, a brief steep lean that says a fire burned for a long while. The chorus does not stop at breath. In the middle of the last century, we dusted the world with rare atoms that natural processes almost never spread on those dates and in those patterns. Most of these decay, but they leave descendants with clocks we understand. Far from drama, that's the point, a quiet, patient clue. Along the world's edges, another note is settling into sand. Where heat and waste met the shore, plastics fused with beach grains into hard, odd pebbles. Storms will grind them. Waves will bury them. Some will last. Buried in deeper pages, there will be places where certain metals rise briefly out of place. Faint smudges from the way we dig and scatter, the way dust rides wind and settles far from its source. Taken alone, each sign is easy to dismiss. Air can tilt from volcanoes. Glass can form in lightning. Metals can travel with desert winds. Deep time is full of good impersonators. But a choir is harder to fake. Imagine the breath bending the metals, smudging the odd stones appearing, and the rare atoms whispering all within the same narrow slice of the record, and across far apart rooms that never speak to each other unless something unusual makes them sing at once. That is the kind of music worth leaning into here. And then there is the living page. Bodies remember in their own way. Sometimes the archive is written in pollen that suddenly shifts its mix, or plankton whose shells change shape, or a dip in the variety of life that lines up with the other notes. Our own species carries a faint scar from a near miss long ago, as if the genome kept a private entry no historian could write at the time. If a civilization leans on the world hard enough, if it poisons, heats, or darkens it for long enough, the living page may nod in agreement with Ice Lake Cave and Sea. That nod, too, is part of the chord. To find a chord like this, we have to listen where memory lasts. The map is simple to draw and hard to reach. Offshore, where old rivers once met the sea shelves, have been piling up pages for ages. They lie drowned now beyond farmers and feet kept safe under cold green water. Inland, the best lakes do not churn their bottoms much. They lay down light and dark pages year on year, thin and legible as hair. In dry country caves grow their calendars in crystal band by band, drop by patient drop. At the poles, bubbles in ice keep snapshots of sky. Dust in the layers tells of distant fires and far volcanoes. Even deserts keep their own in basins that filled and dried again and again, trapping long, tidy sequences. Pick places like these on different continents. Plan the depth and the resolution before you touch the ground. Share samples with teams that do not know which slice is suspect. Let the method be harder than the hope. What would count as hearing the music? Not an isolated spike or a single odd stone. A moment long for us, short for rocks where the breath bends fast, where a fine rise of certain elements appears in far lakes and shelves, where new kinds of fused grains show up on coasts that never met, where a dust of rare atoms or their descendants settles into the same thin pages, and where the living page shakes at the same time. It is not a confession carved in granite. It is a set of quiet agreements. We do not pretend the planet is silent. Impact scars have their own chemistry, strong and strange. Great eruptions right with ash and gas, with ocean shifts and darkened skies. Wildfires can fool us with heat and soot. That is why the test must be kinder to the past than to our wishes. Compare the candidate moment against what we know of these natural moods. Ask whether the timing is too synchronized, whether the heat implied is too high for forests alone, whether the spread of metals is too global for a few bad seasons of dust. Each time the planet says, I can do that, without you subtract the case and try again. You will notice that as the rules get stricter, the tone gets calmer. That is a feature, not a flaw. If the music is there, it can stand the volume turned down. If it is not, the quiet saves us from fooling ourselves. Either way, the practice has value. It teaches us how to hear what we are writing right now. It reminds us that the most enduring lines of our story may be the ones we never meant to draft, waste heat dust, small and everywhere. It asks us to live in a way that lets a future reader say they learned, not only they burned. Because this is also a mirror. If someone before us left a chord, they did not plan it. They did not compose it to be heard across ages. It happened as a side effect of living loudly. We are in the same danger. We can be heard for the wrong reasons. But we can also choose differently. We can make the breath bend less and later scatter fewer metals, leave fewer new stones on beaches that never grew them before. We can let the living page show resilience instead of shock. A civilization worth remembering is one that learns which notes linger and learns to soften them. Picture for a moment what success would feel like. A ship far offshore pulls a long, wet core onto its deck. Half a world away, a field team lifts a narrow cylinder of lake mud. In a cave, a beam of light slides over a glossy band. In a clean room, a thin slice of ice hisses as ancient air escapes. The graphs line up. Not perfectly, nature never draws with a ruler, but enough to make the room fall quiet. The breath leans here, the metals rise there. The strange pebbles cluster in beaches of the same age. The rare atoms whisper at just the right height. The living page twitches. The usual suspects: impact, volcano, fire. Explain some of it, but not all and not together. The music is not loud, but it is insistent. And if the lines do not line up, if the shelves stay ordinary, the lakes keep their rhythm, the caves do not tilt, the ice does not whisper, the living page is calm, then we accept that answer. We are either the first or we are the first to leave a chord this particular. Both possibilities demand the same thing of us now: attention, humility, care. So we will go on without bullet points and banners, just a map, a method, and a willingness to hear. We will carry our questions to drowned shelves, quiet lakes, dry caves, cold ice, and long deserts. We will let the planet tell us what it kept and what it forgot. And as we listen for someone else's chord, we will learn to play our own with a lighter hand. In the end, deep time is not impressed by monuments. It remembers habits. If there was a civilization before us, its habit changed the chemistry of calm places for a little while. If there was not, our task is the same live, so that when the page turns and turns again, what lingers says less about our noise and more about our wisdom. Not long ago, the earth felt like a one-actor play. Then the stage lights came up, and we saw what was really there: a crowded cast sharing time with us. On Flores Island, small people with stone tools, Homo floresiensis, walked through caves and cooked their meals while our kind was elsewhere. In South Africa, Homo naledi left bones in the dark as if they cared where their dead would rest. High on a windy plateau and deep in caves of Siberia, the Denisovans left almost nothing but whispers in DNA. A shadow species, we know the way. You know a voice through a wall. If these three names surfaced, how many more still hide in the gaps? Branches snapped off the family tree whose leaves never fell into our hands. Why do only we remain under today's lights? Was it our flexible cooperation, our knack for trading stories, our talent for borrowing each other's minds until we form one enormous mind? Was it simply luck being in the right places when the ice pulled back and the grasses spread? The question that follows is the one that keeps you awake. Could another branch, another kind of human, or even something human adjacent have climbed further, once built networks in towns, and perhaps more than vanished before our chapter began? If we went from chipped stone to spacecraft in less than a few 100,000 years, it is not crazy to wonder whether a cousin took a shorter, stranger path long ago. What we know of those cousins is thin. Fossils come as scattered pieces, a finger bone in one cave, a jaw in another, a tooth carried by a river, a sliver of genome in a child from long ago. Between the pieces stretch long distances and longer silences. The official story says there was no industrial branch before us because there is no solid artifact that demands it. That is fair. It is also true that geology erases without pity and that the fossil record is mostly gaps stitched with hope. We have not found it is not the same sentence as it never was. Give the planet a couple of million years and a city, a library, a skeleton, a whole language can become ingredients in a hill with no name. Humility is the only safe posture here. We are not the summit of anything. We are the survivors of filters. We barely understand carriers of habits that happen to work in the weather they met. Our existence proves only that we made it to this page, not that other pages were empty. If intelligence is not our private property, on what grounds do we insist that no other mind ever learned to stack ideas high, to store power outside the body, to send meaning farther than a cry can travel? Look at us without the pride. We might be the most recent experiment, not the final one. Experiments end. Nature tries again. If that bothers you, good. The discomfort is a teacher. It makes the next thought sharper. If a civilization before us did exist, who were they, and what would their lives have felt like inside their own skin? They did not have to be us. They did not have to be human the way we draw it. They could have been a parallel hominin, a broad-shouldered night fire maker, with a genius for wood and pitch and tilt-wing boats, or something further from our shape, a different expression of nervous system and intention altogether. Earth has had time for almost anything. Perhaps they lived through a long stretch of gentle climate, on continents arranged in ways we would not recognize on a map. Perhaps their power did not come from electricity, but from tamed biochemistry, from engines made of living tissue, from materials that rot back to sweetness rather than to rust. Perhaps they never learned the trick of smelting so little metal there to be found, yet they learned a different trick we would barely notice in stone after stone has turned over. Imagine their cities along coasts that no longer exist, their harbors underwater, now their stories swallowed by the slow rise of sea. Imagine trade routes pulled like strings across southern lands when Gondwana was still a conversation among continents, or later threads stitched across shelves now drowned. If they rose tens of millions of years ago, the pressure and heat of time would have pressed their signal down until it looks like the planet's own mood. Perhaps they looked up and counted the same stars we count. Perhaps they learned to split atoms or something stranger. Perhaps, like us, they learned how to make forces larger than their wisdom and paid for it. Here comes the part that tastes like iron we might never know. The past is too wide, the editor too ruthless. But asking changes us anyway. If someone came before and disappeared, our page is not destiny. It is luck rented by the season. If no one came before, the lesson barely shifts. Being first does not make you permanent. Either way, the story of us feels less like a straight road and more like a rope bridge over fog. Language makes the bridge and breaks the heart. It carries everything we mean when we say civilization, knowledge, law. Prayer jokes the secret names of things. The recipe for a medicine, the way to build an arch, so it stands. Language is also the easiest to lose. Let a few generations pass with their mouths closed, and a tongue goes quiet forever. With it goes a way of seeing the world that no camera can catch. We put faith in writing. We carve on stone. We paint on paper. We pin our thoughts to servers that hum in white rooms. Paper burns in an afternoon. Ink fades in a century. A server farm without attention is a warm cave for a little while, and then a box of ghosts. Even stone wears smooth under a patient wind. Give time enough room and every script becomes a pattern a geologist would call weathering. If there was a civilization before us, their language, no matter how graceful, has already blown away. Their libraries are not ruins, they are soils. Their poets are dust in someone else's breath. Stories might survive if they were sung and kept moving. A flood that came too fast, a city at the edge of the world that sank shining people who taught and then left. Over centuries, a clean memory fuzzes into myth. Over millennia, the myth loses its door back to facts. The echo remains, but the mouth that made it is gone. The same future can visit us. If we fail, poems and equations will pass first. Then the words for the tools. Then the words for the seasons. A few chiseled marks might last a while, but without the key, they are only scratches. After enough turns of the page, even the scratches become sand. What remains are the parts of us we did not plan to leave, a breath that leaned a seam of odd dust, a pebble of plastic caught in Beachstone's fist. So what keeps the story alive when the words are gone? The question itself. Every time we tell the old flood tales or hold a cord to the light and see a thin stripe that does not belong, we rehearse an honest kind of wonder. Was there someone before? The asking keeps humility awake. It reminds us that silence is not proof of emptiness. It reminds us that our most precious good meaning has the shortest shelf life. No machine in geology can store a melody or a joke. The earth remembers habits. It does not remember voices. Even if you find it hard to picture civilizations older than memory, you can stand in our own ruins and see the rule. Brilliant societies blaze and fail. The signs they leave are not guarantees. They are invitations to guess. Somewhere a wall is falling and a language with it. Somewhere else a child hears a story at a fire and will carry it farther than any archivist could. Neither the fall nor the carrying is permanent. The page turns. This is where the other minds matter most, not as ghosts to chase, but as mirrors. If there were others, they teach us that intelligence is not a crown. It is a tool with sharp edges. It lets you light the dark and also burn your own house. It builds bridges in brittle systems. It can be tender and reckless in the same heartbeat. Knowing that we can choose how to use ours, we can build memory that does not rely on single points of failure. We can leave notes in the places that last. We can set aside the pride that demands monuments and grow the patience that plants better habits in the quiet rooms of the world. Picture for a moment a night on that earlier Earth. A different city breathes at the edge of a different sea. Lamps glow with a technology we would not recognize. Voices rise in a language we could never learn. Someone there looks up and wonders, are we first? Someone there hears the sea answer with a sound like an old book closing. And then their page turns. Our page will turn too. We cannot hold it open forever. But we can make the last lines kinder. We can keep our questions honest. We can remember that the longest echoes are not marble and bronze. They are the small, repeated choices that change air and water and ground. If we do that, then whether or not there were others, whether or not anyone ever reads us, we have still acted as if the world is worth being careful with. In the next part, we will move from ghosts and guesses to the anatomy of mistakes. We will take the planet's loudest natural voices, impacts, eruptions, great fires, sudden climate lurches, and lay their signatures next to the kind of pattern a civilization would leave. We will learn how to tell thunder from engines, wildfire from furnaces, and accident from habit, not in theory, but in the specific stubborn lines that stone and ice keep when all the songs are silent. Human history is not a straight road. It coils. It climbs, dazzles, and then thins. That spiral is a warning. No matter how bright, civilization has never been permanent. Think of Sumer, the cradle we like to name. They flooded Mesopotamia with first writing pressed into clay, bustling cities like Uruk tablets that track trade and law and poems that still feel warm to the touch. They tamed water and wheel. They practiced the first awkward dances of government, and then after only a few thousand years, the cradle tipped. Floods came. Fields grew salty from the very irrigation that made them rich. Wars wore grooves through the same farmlands that fed their temples. Sumer did not end with one loud day. It faded out of its own successes. Cross the ocean in your mind, and the pattern repeats. The Maya raised stone mountains above green oceans of leaves. Tikal, Palenque, Chichen Itza, cities that could count the sky and carve it into calendars and ceremonies. Their art was fine, their astronomy patient, their rituals as intricate as their steps. Yet in a few centuries, many cities emptied. Drought leaned harder year after year. Factions fought. Forests took back streets. When strangers arrived from across the sea, what they met was not absence, but aftermath. In Southeast Asia, an empire of water and stone grew around Angkor. Canals laced the land. Reservoirs spread like quiet lakes. Angkor Wat still lifts out of the green like a memory that refuses to shut its eyes. But by the 15th century, the system that fed the temples could not survive the shifts of rain and politics. The city loosened its grip. The forest closed its hand. For centuries, the great works slept where roots could hold them. These stories sit within the reach of our own recorded time, and still their edges blur. If empires that ruled millions and built in stone can diminish to rumors wrapped in vines, imagine what forgetting looks like after a million years. The lesson is harsh and simple. Civilization is not linear. It is seasonal. It buds, it flowers, it seeds, it goes to ground. Each collapse takes most of its libraries with it. We build on fragments from earlier turns of the spiral, then mistake the pile for a foundation that reaches bedrock. We call ourselves first because our lamps are bright and our mirrors are close. But if societies this near to us in time can slip out of view, the idea of a civilization before ours far back across long winters of the earth stops sounding like fantasy and starts sounding like a simple possibility. The line between we know they were here and we're not sure what this ruin was is paper thin. Time always wets and tears that paper. Maybe history has left us a clean warning. Every light fades, even the ones that feel like morning. Another strange truth hums under all this. Peoples separated by oceans, confined to their own horizons, tell stories that rhyme. From Greece to India, from the Hopi mesas to Polynesian atolls, we hear the same motifs: a golden season now gone, a flood that reset the map, bright beings or wise visitors who brought gifts and then vanished. The neatest explanation is human nature itself. Every culture meets disaster. Every shore fears water and fire and the dark. Every people wants an origin story for its tools and songs. Of course, similar tales can sprout on their own. That is the standard answer, and it is not wrong. But there is room beside it for a second thought more haunting. Maybe these stories carry a core that was once concrete memories compressed and handed down, retold into different languages and local shapes until the edges all changed but the center stayed. Take the flood. It is not only Noah or the far older Utnapishtim in a boat releasing birds into a quieting sky. The flood turns up in India where a god swims as a fish and tells Manu to build. It reaches Greece where two survivors repopulate a washed world. It runs through Mesoamerica in the Andes. It crosses Africa. It travels the Pacific with sailors who know too well what waves can do in a night. Is it all coincidence? It could be. Or it could be the worn memory of real waters climbing fast at the end of the last ice age when shorelines moved like living things and low countries disappeared. There is a second motif just as widespread, teachers from elsewhere. In Egypt, a god offers writing. In Mesopotamia, wisdom rises from the deep. In Greece, fire is stolen for us. In Central America, a feathered serpent brings maize and stars. The pattern is so common it starts to feel like a soft confession. People everywhere sense that knowledge doesn't spring up by accident. It arrives, it is carried, it is given. Whether those givers were neighboring cultures or a memory of something older is not the point. The point is that myth, when treated gently, can be a kind of compressed data, an archive disguised as a story that survives by being worth repeating. Even if every tale is only a mirror held up to our fears, the mirror still teaches. It shows that we have always known how fragile we are. We have always felt the floor shift under our feet, That is why we tell and retell the same shapes to keep humility awake, to keep courage ready. Now change the lens. Stop thinking of Earth as a house and imagine it as a laboratory that runs on time. Each epoch is an experiment. The planet tries a design for life, lets it run, then wipes the board or changes the conditions and tries again. In the Devonian oceans were the test bench. Fishes with bones and jaws unfolded possibilities that had never been tried. Then an extinction trimmed the menu. Later in the long age of dinosaurs, the world settled into a model that held for more than 150 million years. It felt stable because it was powerful and wide. A single stone from space ended the run. From that ash and that darkness rose the small, warm-blooded experiment that led to us. By that logic, we are not the final result. We are a recent trial. Spiral is an honest word because it holds both the circling and the climb. With each turn, some knowledge returns and some is gone for good. With each turn, the conditions change. Ice, heat, dryness, seas that open and close like doors. In such a place, humility is not optional. It is strategy. It is how you survive the next beat of the planet's heart. Hold Sumer, the Maya Angkor in one hand, and hold the dinosaur age in the other. The scale changes. The rule doesn't. Dominant forms vanish. New forms discover the vacated rooms. If we are just another tenant, then the measure of our wisdom is not how high we build, but how well we learn the building's rules. It is tempting to claim that stories alone can't prove anything. That is true and also beside the point. We are not using stories as evidence. We are using them as lenses. They focus our attention on certain kinds of places, drowned coasts where a fisherman drags up a shard that doesn't fit, terraces of old shorelines far inland, caves that kept smoke's taste longer than any library kept words. They also focus our attention on certain kinds of patterns, a sudden shift in pollen in the same years that a lake lays down a gray film, the same years a cave writes a darker band, the same years a far coast holds glass too hot for fires. Look back again at the societies we can still touch. When they falter, the reason is almost never only one thing. It is drought and stubbornness, salt in the roots and iron in the policy war, and misreading of the sky systems that work until they are pushed a little past their design. Collapse is less a fall than a loosening. People move. Rivers silt. Roads stop being worth the walk. The center stops holding because the center relied on a balance that shifted under it. That is not moralizing. That is mechanics. If forgetting can overtake people whose names we still speak, ask what it does to people whose names no one ever knew. After enough pages, we no longer remember the language, only the tune. After enough pages, even the tune is gone, and all that remains is a record of air and dust and water that leaned strangely for a while. That is what a civilization looks like, in deep time, not a face but a habit. There is comfort and challenge in this. Comfort because it means we are not uniquely doomed. Challenge because it means we are also not uniquely protected. The spiral does not spare the proud. It does not punish the humble. It turns, and what survives are the choices that fit the turn. So what does it mean to live wisely in a world that keeps resetting its experiments? It means building memory that can cross the gap between seasons. It means spreading knowledge in more than one basket on paper, and in minds in stone, and in code in many languages and many places. It means reading the quiet rooms of the planet often enough that their first whispers are heard before they become shouts. It means telling stories that teach listening, not just victory. It means shoring up the systems that feed cities against the kinds of drought that come not if, but when. Picture a last scene to carry forward. Somewhere deep under a jungle canopy, a wall breathes green. The carving on its face is almost gone. A child runs a hand over it and feels grooves that were once letters. They cannot read the words. They can feel that meaning lived here. Far away on a ship rocking above a drowned shelf, a core rises wet from the dark. On its side, a thin band is darker than the rest. A lamp glows over it. A room full of quiet people lean closer. The jungle wall and the dark band tell the same truth in different languages. This page turned once, and it will turn again. In the next part, we will stop at the hinge of the spiral, the moments when natural thunder can be confused for human engines. We will lay the signatures of impacts, eruptions, great fires, and sudden climate jolts beside the softer pattern a civilization would leave. and learn the small, stubborn ways to tell them apart before the page turns on us too. A clever primate learned to keep fire-shaped tools and pass stories, and in under 300,000 years, we bent the biosphere around our habits. On a canvas measured in billions of years, that is not a rain. It is a lab trial. And in this laboratory, failure is the rule. Roughly 1% of all species that ever lived are alive now. 99% are conclusions. No one can say with certainty which side we end up on. If an industrial civilization once stood here before us, they were trials, two brief blooms of intelligence nature may have tested many times in ages we cannot see. Each time mind could have flared into culture, climbed into industry, and then fallen by climate swing, by accident by its own hand. The planet patient and indifferent simply cleared the table and tried again. Thinking this way shrinks our pride to a workable size. We are not a finished product, we are a prototype. And like any prototype, nothing is guaranteed. We could endure, we could fail, or we could be a rung for something else to step on, tougher, quieter, better fitted. So the question that matters is not whether we are unique. It is what we do with the short trial we have. Deep time does not care about our victories or our tragedies. It cares how the experiment ends, and whether the ending leaves anything useful for the next chapter. From our first clear thoughts, we put ourselves at the center. Once we were sure the sun turned around us, heaven sat just overhead, and humanity was the aim of creation. Science has pried our fingers off those illusions one by one. Yet a softer faith remains that our civilization is singular new in a way no future could repeat. We look at towers, rockets, colliders, and assume nothing like this ever stood before. We stare at the blank parts of the geological record and conclude no trace means no predecessor. That claim leans more on our collective ego than on the stubborn facts of stone and time. In a universe this wide, we are dust. In 4.5 billion years, we are minutes. If intelligence is rare but not impossible, then seeing it bloom more than once on the same world is not absurd. Why then are we so quick to anoint ourselves first? Pride also colors how we look forward. Many believe modern civilization cannot truly break that knowledge will save us from anything. History gives the opposite lesson. Every civilization thought itself different until the day the floor went missing. Rome built roads like veins and called itself eternal. The Maya counted the sky and raised stone mountains. Angkor tied an empire with water. Each had good reasons to believe in itself. Each learned that systems fail from the inside first. Arrogance does not only blind, it deafens. While climate tilts forests, thin wars threaten, and destructive tools spread, we soothe ourselves with the idea that cleverness will fix whatever cleverness breaks. Perhaps that is the seed of collapse. Societies rarely fall for lack of power. They fall for surplus confidence. If someone like us stood here long ago, perhaps they too believed they were the peak and fate would bend around them. Perhaps that was the moment the planet's larger rhythms handed them a lesson they refused to learn. Humility is the first condition for survival. By that light, hubris is our most fragile mirror. It shows that the danger is not only asteroids, volcanoes, or ice, but ourselves. If we cannot learn from lights that already went out, we become one more brief flame. The Earth will turn the page either way. The only open question is whether our line ends with a lesson or a shrug. History is not merely memory, it is a glass. What looks back is rarely flattering. The message from Sumer to Rome, from the Maya to the Khmer, is steady, nothing keeps forever. Collapse almost never arrives as a single blow. It is the slow gathering of hairline cracks, exhausted soils, erratic rain, costly wars spreading illness ambitions, outpacing what systems can carry until the structure loses its shape and falls faster than anyone living inside it can admit. The lesson is plain: civilizations die less by storm than by erosion. None imagine it until after. If there was a civilization before ours, they could have walked the same path. Overshoot overconfidence, a last season of brightness, then a quiet. Our reflection is hard to ignore. We live inside a global system stretched tight, drawing down old sunlight, warming the air, thinning the wild places that keep us sane. The difference now is scale. Our system is planetary. If it slips, the echo is not regional. It is everywhere. What then would we leave when the lights go out? Not libraries, not museums, not songs. Those are short-lived treasures. What persists are cold imprints, the scars of industry cut into rock and mud. Start with plastic. Since the mid-20th century, we have made billions of tons and spread them from ocean trenches to polar snow to our own blood. Most will fragment, but some will sink and be buried, some will melt and fuse with sand. Along certain coasts, people already find hard-odd pebbles, plastiglomerate, where plastic shell coral and beach grains became one. In deep time, those seams may outlast our monuments as clear markers of our age. Then there is radiation. Open-air nuclear tests dusted the world with atoms nature almost never scatters in those patterns fingerprints, as delicate as they are decisive. Many of those isotopes decay quickly on the planet's clock. Some leave descendants with clocks long enough to whisper for ages. You need not read their names to hear the point, a quiet global signature that needs no temple to deliver its message. At our breath. Carbon dioxide and methane have jumped to levels no recent epoch holds. The ocean drinks part of that and turns it into future stone. Drill through those pages and you will hit a thin slice where the numbers bend sharply. The air itself kept a diary, and the sea copied it. Stir in our metals. We dig and smelt and scatter lead mercury in a chorus of elements torn from their host rocks and flung wide. In calm sediments, downwind and downstream, a faint rise appears, a smudge different from the layers above and below. Cement dust fly ash, the glass born of heat higher than most forest fires can make each small, each steady, each likely to be repeated on different coasts of the same age. We do not intend these signatures. That is why they endure. On the scale of stone, what lasts are the side effects. Temples fall, byproducts linger. And the harshest irony arrives here, the most durable record of a civilization is the waste it did not mean to make. The planet will remember us for chemistry, not for speeches. We can be offended by that, or we can be instructed. If we see ourselves as an experiment, the goal is not to be the longest, but to be the kindest to the page. That means changing the habits that draw the darkest lines. Less breath that leans. Fewer metals in the wrong places. Fewer new stones that only storms of industry can make. It means building memory that can cross interruptions, knowledge stored in many languages and many places copied by hands, as well as servers taught, as well as archived. It means arranging our systems so that a shock in one place does not pull the whole net under. Humility turns out to be technical. It is not a mood, it is design. It is redundancy and restraint. It is the courage to decide that some powers are too sharp to juggle at scale. It is the grace to accept that limits are not enemies. They are the shape of survivable life. Because if intelligence is not ours alone, if Earth has tried mind more than once, then the lesson from older pages is not that we are doomed, it is that the rules are stable. Systems overreach, climates swing, shocks arrive, memory fails if it is not tended. The practices that stand a chance are the same in every round, spread out risk. Listen to early whispers from the quiet rooms. Keep your appetite inside the carrying capacity of the place that feeds you and store meaning, where wind and water cannot steal all of it at once. Even then, there is no promise we will be remembered. Language is our brightest tool and our most fragile good. It is the bridge between past and present, and it is the first thing to fall when mouths stop moving. A few silent generations can erase a grammar that held a people together for 1,000 years. Paper goes first, ink fades. Servers die fast without caretakers. Stone smooths and loses its names. If there was a civilization before us, their words are air by now. If ours ends, our words will follow. What remains beyond all songs is the question. Each time we retell a flood story or find a thin stripe in a core that does not fit, we keep a form of memory alive, the kind made of attention and humility. Was there someone before? The asking is a practice. It keeps our pride from sealing our ears. It reminds us that silence in rock is not proof. It is an invitation to look where memory actually lasts. So return to the lab image and be honest, nature is not unkind, only uninvested. It will keep running trials. We can be a short, bright one that ends as waste, or a longer, quieter one that leaves gentler lines. We can be a voice that vanishes or a habit that future readers will respect when they meet it in stone. Before we turn the page, hold one small scene. Far in the future, after our season, a different mind cuts a neat cylinder from a calm seafloor. The core rises wet and heavy. In the light, a narrow band appears darker, flecked with unusual grains, A brief bend in carbon, a faint whisper of rare atoms. Someone there tilts their head the way you do when a melody sounds familiar. They do not see our towers or hear our songs. They see a habit. They read a lesson. Some atoms keep time longer than empires. A few of the signatures we've scattered, those quiet products of split nuclei, come with clocks that tick for tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of years. Which means that millions of years from now, long after our archives have curled back into pulp, and our towers have unthreaded into sand, a thin horizon in rock could still carry a whisper, a dusting of descendants from short-lived isotopes, a pattern nature rarely writes on her own. It would not say our names. It would only say someone here learned how to open the heart of matter. Then there is our breath. In less than 2 centuries, we have shoved a mountain of carbon into the sky and jostled the planet's own cycling of that element. The sea drinks a share, turns some into shells and limestone, and sets the rest aside in mud where patient pressure knits it into stone. Far ahead, a core lifted from those pages could show a sharp, sudden spike, a thin blade of altered carbon that any future reader would recognize as a moment when air went strange. A brief Anthropocene printed not as a chapter of monuments, but as a geochemical exclamation point. Other traces will endure in quieter ways. We are spreading rare elements once locked in ore, lithium, neodymium, cobalt, now scattered across soils, rivers, and coasts by our hunger for batteries and magnets. We have invented stubborn molecules, pesticides, dioxins, the forever chemicals that outlast seasons and sometimes lifetimes, and let them seep into water and mud. With time and burial, these turn into pale scars in the stratigraphy chemistry with an accent the planet did not have before us. Laid together, the picture hurts. The parts of us most likely to persist are not the pieces we are proudest of. If a civilization comes after and sends their drill through our layer, they will not encounter Beethoven or Shakespeare. They will meet plastic pebbles, a nuclear lint of rare atoms, abrupt bends in carbon, and faint residues of industrial poisons. That is our fossil will. Turn that lens backward, and an awkward thought follows. If someone came before, then some of the oddities we already puzzle over, metal spikes, out-of-season mysterious shifts in chemistry, might be their faint leftovers. We have been learning how to read our own scar into stone. The same method could translate older scars we have not yet recognized. Memory in deep time never lives in statues. It lives in wounds. Meanwhile, we tell ourselves we are strong because we are connected. The globe is laced together with instant signals. Cargo streams curl between continents. A few crucial lanes carry grain and fuel. A handful of factories etch our nerves into silicon. That very link is the weakness. The tighter the weave, the easier it is for a single tear to run. We had a small lesson not long ago. A shape too small to see with the eye walked across the world and showed us how many systems have no slack. Borders closed, shelves thinned, engines idled. If a minor test can fog the glass, imagine the larger hands, a faster plague, a regional nuclear exchange, a failure that knocks a grid down not for hours but for months. Cascades do not ask permission. When nets are tight, everything is downstream of everything else. Our era loves concentration. A short list of factories thinks for the species. A few ports feed continents. A few cables carry the conversations we mistake for reality. It is efficient until a storm parks above the wrong sea, or a war sits on the wrong strait, or a fault in the wrong clean room burns a week into a year. The same pattern that once ran water to Angkor's fields or lifted Maya stones into place runs through our own systems. When the climate leans, when the inputs shift, when the machine we built to balance itself suddenly needs more care than we can give, the center loosens. What looks like strength becomes a brittle silhouette. Play the tape forward without malice. Long blackouts roll across cities not built for the dark. Food moves for a while, then doesn't. Pharmacies ration, then close. Hospitals work miracles until the miracles need parts the hospital cannot get. People relearn the size of a day on foot. In a span small enough to fit inside a single lifetime, our high-humming system can sink back into local, stubborn, handmade life. A global civilization does not require centuries to disappear. It can be done in a generation. In the age after, if there are storytellers, they will speak of a bright time when people flew, spoke across oceans in a breath, and played with the power of stars, and they will be believed and doubted in equal measure because there will be no obvious proof left to point at. This is the bitter symmetry of power. The stronger the system, the more tempting it becomes to balance it on fewer pillars. The fewer the pillars, the more elegant the design looks. Elegance in nature is often the dress of fragility. We are not so different from the old empires we study. They were confident until the river failed them. We are confident until the chip fab pauses or the grid hiccups. Different scales, same geometry. Thread all the pieces together, how quickly cities die without caretakers. How neatly geology erases, how often myths repeat, how clearly bright cultures wither and a picture comes into focus. Civilization is likely not a march, but a wheel. The planet tries intelligence more than once. A species rises, learns to make tools that reach beyond muscle, organizes itself along long lines, taps new energies. Then something happens, storm or fire or war or appetite that outruns the land and the spokes give way. The board is cleaned. After long quiet, a new hand sets pieces down. Each turn leaves hints, stories compressed into legend seams, in rock that do not match the chapters above or below, but never leaves enough to end debate. Each turn believes itself first. What else could it believe when the room has been swept so well? If our kind can reach from first stone to first satellite in far less than 1,000,000 years, why should 4.5 billion years host only this one round? Life has already started and stopped in many forms. Why should mine be the one exception? Old tales knew this intuitively. The Greeks spoke of ages named for metals that worsened and began again. India counts epochs that ripen and rot and reset. The Maya told of worlds before ours, each ended by flame or flood. Call them moral metaphors if you like. They might also be the folk memory of cycles too long for any one language to hold in detail. All of this could read as grim. It does not have to. The point is not to announce doom, but to name rules. One of those rules is that what the earth will remember are the lines we draw without meaning to the lean of the air, the dust of strange atoms, the new stones on beaches, the shy rise of metals and mud. Another rule is that thick nets can tear faster than loose ones. A third is that pride makes poor earplugs. So what then? If the only dependable archive is the one we write into calm places, we can choose to write gentler lines. We can move away from habits that leave permanent bruises. We can make systems less elegant and more forgiving, with more paths when one fails and more hands that know the craft when the lights blink. We can copy our memory redundantly on paper and minds in many languages on many shores and weave education into culture so heavily that even a hard season cannot pull it all free at once. We can treat myth not as proof, but as a compass that points us toward drowned coasts and quiet lakes and caves that keep secrets. We can calibrate our instruments on the planet's loud voices, impacts, eruptions, wildfires, abrupt climate jolts, so that when we meet a softer chord, we do not mistake thunder for engines or engines for thunder. And we can look at our likely legacy without flinching. If we are remembered for our waste, let that shame be useful. Let it move us to leave less of it, and in leaving less to buy time for the parts of us that cannot fossilize care fairness. The stubborn practice of listening to pass through mouths and hands even when servers sleep. The experiment frame helps. In a lab, you do not love a trial so hard you refuse to end it when it is clearly misaimed. You adjust. You add slack. You back away from the edge cases that always fail. You keep notes where the next experimenter can read them. We are both subject and scientist here. We can decide that surviving the turn of the wheel is a better ambition than pretending the wheel does not turn. Hold one last image before we turn to the final part. Far ahead, a different mind, clever in a way we cannot guess, lowers a corer into a calm seafloor and pulls up a dark, wet column of layered years. In the light, a narrow band gleams a little wrong. There is more carbon than usual, a dust of odd atoms, grains of glass that do not belong to storms. They do not see us. They see a habit. They sit with the shock that a habit can be all that remains of a world. Then they ask the only question that matters: can we learn from this? We are not the opening nor the finale. We are a turn of the wheel, one that can repeat or that can end with us. The wheel keeps moving with or without our hands on it. If we are careless, Homo sapiens becomes an echo so thin it cannot hold a face, only a name, and even the name smears. The night sky makes that easy to believe. Stars sit at distances our minds can say but not feel. Galaxies pile like mist, each packed with suns. Against that backdrop, we are a dust mote floating through a dark room. On the cosmic scale, we are almost nothing. And yet inside that almost nothing, we carry a terrible, tender power. In a blink of evolutionary time, we have warmed the air, salted the seas with our chemistry-driven species to their ends, and forged tools that could end our own story in an afternoon. Dinosaurs ruled far longer than we have been upright, but they did not edit the atmosphere. The rock that ended them fell once. We drop our own small meteors, daily engines, smokestacks, grids, and then congratulate ourselves on the brightness. The danger is not power. The danger is power guided by pride. We tell ourselves that we are in charge of nature because we can move rivers and shave mountains and coax food from poor soils. What we are truly good at is shaking a balance that kept us alive without our help. If that balance snaps, we will be the first to fall through. Maybe somewhere there are other worlds where other minds came to the same door, clever enough to build, not wise enough to live with what they built. Maybe that is why the sky is quiet. If intelligence is common but humility is rare, most lights go out before they can say hello. If that is so, our place is sharp and clear. We are small in the whole, dangerous at home, fragile across deep time. We act like we are permanent, and we are not. Between the feeling of cosmic insignificance and the fact of local planetary power, there is only one honest question left: what will we do with this short, bright hour? Carry the humility of science past the lab and into the bones. We are not the center of anything, not the Earth as we once thought, not the sun's family as Copernicus taught us, not the galaxy, not the story of life here. That is not a sentence of despair. It is a cure for delusion. Humility does not shrink us to uselessness. It sets the scale so our actions can matter in the right way. When you realize you are not special, you finally grasp how special this moment is. If civilization is a flame and wind, its very vulnerability is what makes stewardship sacred. A flame that knows the wind is wiser than a torch that believes the air owes its stillness. Call this cosmic humility. It has nothing to do with bowing your head and everything to do with lifting your eyes and letting the picture change your posture. You see that before us there could have been other lights. You see that after us life will go on differently lit. We are not the point. We are a point. And because of that, we owe the page we are writing more care than pride can afford. So what precisely does care look like when translated into a civilization's daily breath? It looks like choosing habits that leave soft lines in stone instead of scars. It looks like turning down the volume of our media or less smoke for the air to keep fewer new stones on beaches, less dust of rare atoms drifting down in thin global pages. It looks like rebuilding memory so it does not depend on single points of failure knowledge in many tongues and minds, as well as machines on pages that can burn, and pages that will not, in places that flood and places that dry. It looks like systems that fail softly, grids with islands, supply lines with local routes, cities that can feed themselves for a while when the trucks sleep. It looks like counting enough to notice early whispers from lakes and caves, from ice and trees so we can move before shouts arrive. It looks too like a new kind of confidence, the kind born of restraint. We are good at sharp tools. We are poor at knowing when to put them down. The courage we need is not only in building reactors or rockets, it is in deciding which tools cannot be safely scaled and how to live well without them. True ambition is not a taller spire. It is a culture that still works when the wind leans. That kind of ambition does not photograph well. It does not make parades. It makes grandchildren. This return to scale can feel like loss until you notice what it buys. It buys time for the living page to recover, time for us to rewrite our part so the next reader sees more than a wound. It buys margin, the slack that keeps a shock from becoming a break. It buys attention, enough quiet to hear the planet's rhythms and match them instead of fighting them until both of us are exhausted. None of this erases the question that started us walking where we first. The honest answer is still a quiet maybe. Deep time is a grinder. Geology is an editor. Human memory is a weak lamp in a long corridor. If someone like us lived long ago, their cities are mud, their metals are dust, their voices are air. At best, we will find thin seams and odd stones, and a breath that leaned and say something unusual happened here. That is not a defeat. It is a calibration. It tells us where to listen and how to build, so that if someone ever asks the same question of us, the answer they pull from stone is not just a list of our mistakes. There is another question beneath the first, and it is the one that matters now. Not were we first, but will we be remembered kindly? The planet will remember us either way. It always remembers habits. If all we leave is a wounded layer, we will be a caution without a caption. If we leave a gentler line, less breath that leans fewer toxic ghosts, signs of shock followed by signs of restraint, we become something rarer evidence that intelligence can learn to carry itself. That is the hinge. If we go on as if cleverness is a shield, we will join the chorus of myths, a bright people who flew and spoke across oceans and held stars in their hands and still forgot how to live. The earth will erase our statues and keep our chemistry, and a new mind will puzzle over a thin dark band and ask as we did if anyone came before. If we choose humility as a practice and not a slogan, we could become the first experiment on this world to thread power through restraint long enough to outlast a few beats of the planet's heart. Not forever. Nothing is forever. Long enough to change the odds for whoever comes next. This is not a sermon. It is a user manual with the poetry left in. Live as if someone you respect will read your layer. Leave less that must be apologized for. Build more that can be taught by mouth when servers sleep. Plant redundancy like orchards. Make cities that can sip when the river's loud and drink when it is shy. Keep knowledge moving like seed. Treat myth as a compass and science as a map, and let each correct the other's lies. When thunder sounds, ask whether it is a mountain speaking or a factory. When engines roar, ask what they buy that attention could not have bought cheaper. When a tool works beautifully at small scale, do not assume it can fill the sky and still be kind. If there were others before us, we honor them by not repeating their last mistake. If there were none, we honor the future by not making the first mistake on such a scale that nothing like us tries again for a very long time. Either way, the work is the same. Make the line we leave narrow, honest, and merciful. We end where we began, with a question and a choice. Were we the first? Maybe. Will we be the last? Almost certainly not. What will we leave? That answer is moving under our feet. It is written every day in exhaust and harvest, in grids and schools, in the way we listen, when quiet rooms of the planet speak. It is written in how we treat our power, not as proof that we deserve to be here, but as the test that decides if we get to stay. Look up one more time. The stars are not waiting for our reply. The silence is not personal. It is just large. Down here on this pale light, where every song we have ever sung has been sung, the air is close enough to feel. The wheel will turn, this is certain. What is not certain is whether our page will close like a fist or like a hand opening. Leave a lesson, not a wound. Leave a chord, not a shout. Leave a way for someone later to say they were small and knew it, strong and careful, brief and worthy. In the long hush of the universe, no one will answer for us. The only voice that can is ours here now, in how we live this short, bright hour.